Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix was released in 2007 and saw the last director change of the series, with David Yates coming in to take the helm on this one. And he brings us both a more mature looking and feeling Harry Potter film, which is really nice to see this leap in directing with the leap of maturity in characters showcased in the film. Since Voldemort's return in the previous entry, Goblet of Fire, this world suddenly feels a lot more serious. Threats seem a lot more imminent. The characters are past the point of no return. And David Yates is able to capture this feeling very well. And just a heads up, I will not be comparing the film to the book. This is strictly a movie review. That being said, this book is the longest of the series at over 800 pages, and yet it was the shortest Harry Potter film to date, which meant a lot of the story had to be condensed or cut out. And I talked about this being one of the major flaws of Goblet of Fire, but the story in Order of the Phoenix is able to suit this format better. Not great, but better than Goblet of Fire did. Yates is able to incorporate a few montages that work very nicely to tell a large chunk of the story in a small chunk of time, particularly with the Ministry of Magic and with Umbridge. And I might as well talk about her now. I think that Dolores Umbridge is probably one of the greatest villains ever created. I actually think she's the best villain of the entire series. Anytime you mention her name, it's an instant reaction of, I hate her. She is so passive-aggressive in her demeanor. I think she'd actually be less evil if she was just straight up with people, like how Voldemort is. And the fact that she thinks she is so perfect and good just makes the audience want to punch her that much more. So the conflict with her is able to drive the story forward through much of the film, which makes for a more challenging year at Hogwarts for Harry. And that's saying something. The other new villain introduced in this film is Bellatrix Lestrange, who is a villain on the complete opposite side of the spectrum. She is straight up about being evil. She is not orderly, she is crazy and chaotic. Just look at her. Helena Bonham Carter does a fantastic job with her portrayal here. And the other new character I wanted to mention is Luna Lovegood. What a role model, really. She is so selfless and has so much self-esteem that others bullying her has zero effect on her whatsoever. She continues to live her life the way she believes is right, and is always so kind to everyone else around her. That's the kind of friend I want right there. J.K. Rowling wrote some truly remarkable characters here. The acting out of everyone involved is pretty good, especially the aforementioned characters though. But I also want to mention Ralph Fiennes, who does a great job as Voldemort yet again, totally owns the role. But Gary Oldman really steals the show as Sirius Black whenever he is on screen. He hasn't had much interaction with Harry in this series so far, not even making a true appearance in the last film, Goblet of Fire. So there's a lot of ground to cover to really build their relationship in this movie, which means the few interactions that Harry and Sirius have here could not be wasted, and they weren't. Each time they're together, you can sense why Harry has such a fondness for Sirius. Their personalities match well, they stand for the same things. You can really see that Sirius truly cares about Harry. He's really the father figure that Harry never really had. I loved all their interactions together. They felt real to me, which made a scene at the end of the film so difficult to watch. It always is. I always tear up. And the scene with that muted scream always gets me. It was an interesting choice to mute all sound but the music in that scene. I never would have thought of it, but it was incredibly powerful, and probably more powerful than it would have been had there been sound. It let the audience truly feel and reflect upon what had just happened. And after this, we get easily the best duel in the series so far, with Dumbledore facing off against Voldemort in what is really just a visual feast for the eyes. This battle was shot and framed so well in such a way that the battle truly felt epic. Great CGI on display here, as well as great sound effects. And that was actually something that stuck out to me maybe more than the CGI in the movie, was the sound effects. There are several instances of these harsh, warped sounds, especially when Harry is having an inner conflict, that just add to the disturbing nature of these parts of the film. And the music is so good. Losing John Williams in the last film was a hard blow, but Nicholas Hooper, who composed this film, certainly does his best at putting his own spin on the Harry Potter score. It is still magical and adventurous at just the right parts, but at others it is deeply heartbreaking and dramatic. But it's not all doom and gloom. We get some great quality time with Harry, Ron, and Hermione here all just hanging out, and they seem to have extended their friend group to include Neville, Ginny, and Luda, and also sometimes Fred and George. And they even threw in a nice little setup for a Ron-Hermione relationship down the road. The main lesson I take away from the film is that the truth will always win out at the end. For the entirety of the film, the Daily Prophet, which is the Wizarding World's mainstream newspaper, which works in tandem with the Ministry of Magic, the governing body of the Wizarding World, the governing body of the Wizarding World of England, tries to smear Dumbledore and Harry and create lies about them in order to silence them and the truth from getting out, even though the newspaper has no basis in any of the claims they're making. They also beat the dead horse that Sirius Black is still a murderer on the loose. But of course the public's gonna believe them. Why shouldn't they? They're the mainstream newspaper. This creates a lot of tension for Harry at school, as clearly there would be a lot of people who think he's a crazy liar based on what they've heard. Thankfully, something like that could never happen in our world today. But Harry endures all of this, and thankfully the truth does indeed win out at the end. I really like that J.K. Rowling was able to take this rather massive concept and scale it down in a way that kids reading the books could understand. And it's on display here in the film in a way that kids could easily understand as well. The kids here are growing up before our very eyes. Harry gets his first kiss in the film. They're starting to have to make really tough decisions and even learn to fight. This movie shows some great character development in the main cast, but also in Snape. I really like these flashback scenes we get with him. They provide some nice insight to the audience on this negative relationship Snape always references he had with Harry's father. The only two things I have for negativity's sake here are that there is some pretty bad CGI on display with Hagrid's half-brother Groppy. It looks like okay, decent video game CGI, but it doesn't belong in this movie, and neither do really the centaurs. And in the book, the centaurs are known to be fine scholars, even more educated than humans generally. There's even a centaur that becomes a professor in the book. And in the film, the centaurs are deemed to be mere savages, really. Which is fine if they want to make those changes. Like I said, I'm not judging this film based on the book here. But it was already established in Sorcerer's Stone that the centaurs were not savages. They could speak, they were intelligent creatures. And we can see this when Harry interacts with one in the Forbidden Forest. So I don't appreciate this inconsistency, which was glaring here. Actually, there was one other negative thing about the film, and that was that there were a few minor plot holes, like how did these characters get from here to here? And these things may have been explained in the book, but for just that audience watching the film, it may not have been clear, and I wish that those things had been clarified a bit more. But overall, this was so far the best film in the series up to this point, which I never used to think. Order of the Phoenix was usually middle of the road for me, but this time I saw so much more in the film that I guess I had missed on previous watches. I really loved it. David Yates really fleshes out some characters, features a very focused story that feels like a natural progression from what we've already seen, that also includes setups for the future films, and has easily the biggest climax to any Harry Potter film yet. And I'm gonna give Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix a 9.5 out of 10. Well guys, what do you think of the Order of the Phoenix? Let me know in the comments down below. Please make sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you for my next review.